Have you ever tried to iron a shirt? It's almost impossible, because the shirt is not, as shops imply, a simple object. It's a geometric insult, a three-dimensional thing that at some point we've collectively decided ought to be flat. Not a theoretical shirt, the one that exists only in the minds of people with matching hangers, good lighting, and a relationship with linen spray that borders on devotional. I mean a real shirt, a shirt that has been worn by a real human body, then left on a chair or on the floor or that sacred domestic shrine known as the floordrobe. You lay it on the ironing board and immediately discover the first truth. A shirt has shoulders, curves, a collar like small-scale architecture, sleeves that behave like snakes, cuffs with the buttonholes the size of a moral loophole, and seams specifically designed to wrap themselves around a person who is inconveniently not shaped like a plank. And yet here we are, approaching this fabric sculpture with a lump of blazing hot metal and the serene confidence of a civilization that's clearly lost perspective. We are trying to turn a body-shaped object into a polite rectangle, into a kind of wearable spreadsheet. That's the joke, and that's the cruelty. Ironing isn't hard because the technology is complicated, it's a lump of hot metal. It's hard because the task itself is philosophically dishonest. You're trying to erase evidence that a human body has been inside the shirt, moving, sweating, bending, sitting down, existing in time. The shirt creases because life has occurred, and the iron is there to deny it. Now, in my case, there's an extra layer of farce because I've only got one working arm, which means ironing a shirt is not really a domestic chore, it's closer to interpretive dance about the limits of the human spirit. Although I'm not sure having two arms would improve things much, there'd be simply more capacity for disappointment. With one arm, ironing becomes a negotiation with gravity. I pin the shirt down with an elbow or with just sheer resentment. A sleeve flops away like a defiant eel. The collar behaves like it's been advised by lawyers. The buttons, those smug little bastards, continue to exist as bumps. And every time I smooth one bit out, another section re-wrinkles out of pure spite. I begin to suspect the shirt has a personal grievance. Of course, the shirt doesn't care. It isn't asking to be ironed. The shirt is perfectly happy rumpled. It has no shame, no ambition, no interview at 11 with a man called Graham who will silently decide whether I'm competent based on the angle of my collar. That's who the ironing is for. Not for me, not for the shirt. Them. It's for them. And since we're here, we should ask a perfectly reasonable question. Who invented ironing? Who looked at cloth and thought, you know what this needs? Heat, pressure, and an entire moral system. People have been trying to flatten fabric for a very long time. In ancient China, heated pans were used to smooth cloth, and for centuries in Europe and elsewhere, people used heavy metal irons heated on stoves or containers filled with hot coals. But the electric iron was patented in 1882 by Henry W. Seeley in New York, which is exactly the kind of 19th century sentence that makes progress sound faintly threatening. Domestic ironing as we now know it, plug-in, standardised, a routine little altar of respectability, really takes hold in the 20th century. Steam irons only became common much later, with post-war designs making the thing faster and easier, but no less absurd. So this wasn't some timeless law of nature, it was an invention, which is useful to remember, because sometimes invented things pretend to be inevitable. Ironing is really just social theatre with steam. We pretend it's about neatness, about looking smart, about making an effort. But smart is one of those words that should make you raise an eyebrow. Smart for whom? Smart compared to what? Smart according to which secret rules? Are they written by people with money, energy, spare arms and a mythical faith in surfaces? A pressed shirt isn't just cloth that's been heated and flattened. It's a signal. It says, I'm reliable, I can be trusted with keys, I remember passwords, I won't embarrass the company, I have mastered the rituals of adulthood, I am safe to employ or befriend or let into a building with glass doors. A wrinkled shirt, meanwhile, says, I sat down, I moved, I was in a hurry, I have children, I have pain, depression, I have priorities, or worst of all, I simply didn't care. Society hears that as unpredictable. And society hates unpredictability almost as much as it hates visible need. And that's why dress codes exist. They're not about taste, they're about control. Smart casual is not a style, it's a trap. A polite way of saying, we're going to judge you, but not explain the rules clearly enough for you to win. And yet you try to win anyway. You iron the shirt. Wrinkles aren't dangerous, they're not unsanitary, they don't reduce intelligence, they don't make you morally worse. They're just evidence that you are a creature existing in time. They say, this person has a body. Which is awkward because despite all its talk of authenticity, modern culture remains deeply uneasy about bodies. Bodies in adverts, fine. Bodies in cinema, fine. Bodies in theory, absolutely marvellous. Bodies as lived reality, less popular. Bodies that are tired, asymmetrical, scarred, odd, old, trembling, fatigued, in pain, or visibly different, those are more difficult. Ironing is part of that discipline. It teaches shirts to behave, and by extension, it teaches me to behave. The language gives the game away. We do not warm a shirt, we press it. We don't soothe it, we don't soften it, we press it. Apply force until compliance happens. A perfect shirt is not evidence of cleanliness, it is evidence of submission. Then there are uniforms. The moment clothing becomes standardised, it stops being merely what you wear and becomes what you are. Uniforms don't just cover bodies, they organise them. They take a messy human being with fears, memories, private grief, opinions, and the occasional urge to cry in a supermarket, and they turn that person into something legible, a role, a function, a unit. Once you've been turned into a unit, other people can treat you like one. This is why militaries obsess over dress, creases, polished shoes, buttons, order. It isn't because generals have a secret passion for menswear, though I wouldn't rule that out. It's because uniform is discipline made visible. A uniform says, I belong to this. A uniform says, I am replaceable. A uniform says, whatever I was before, that's not the story now. And there's a darker convenience too. It's easier to kill another human being once they've been turned into an emblem. A person in standard issue cloth is easier to think of as a target, a hostile, an enemy combatant, an asset. Language does its part. Words arrive to sand the human edges off the situation until all that remains is geometry. And geometry, as ever, makes cruelty feel tidy. And you see the same paradox in places that look at first glance as though they've solved it. Take some Hasidic Jewish communities, the very visibly orthodox ones. Black suits, black hats, white shirts, black shoes, as if the male population has been hired as a single disapproving doorman. The women too, in a deliberately restrained palette, modest, consistent, meant to refuse the whole bright carnival of contemporary fashion. It's a uniform. And like all uniforms, it does two things at once. It depersonalises you inside the group, so nobody becomes the peacock, but it also makes you instantly legible to the outside world, not as a man in a suit, but as one of us. The uniform doesn't erase identity, it relocates it. But even there, where the point is to refuse display, status has a way of sneaking back in. The black suit could be cheap and shiny or beautifully cut, bespoke, better cloth, better drape. The fur hat, the stremmer, comes in grades from perfectly ordinary to eye-wateringly expensive, which is impressive considering it's designed to signal essentially, I am not here to show off. There's even a lovely absurd detail, the sort reality throws in to stop you getting too solemn. Stremel makers, known as stremel mashers, are said to keep their trade closely guarded, as if they're enriching uranium rather than sewing fur into a hat. But even if someone's wearing the same cut, somebody's will fit better, somebody's will be newer, somebody's cloth will be heavier, cleaner, more correct. Equality can outlaw colour, it can't outlaw the human urge to rank. And if you want the modern glossy version of that same impulse, it's sitting in a display case with a price tag that makes your kidneys flinch. In July 2025, Sotheby's sold Jane Birkin's original Hermes Birkin for €8.6 million. A handbag, a 1980s collision of celebrity and leatherwork, transfigured into some kind of holy relic. 9 people bid over it for more than 10 minutes, which, in my opinion, is a long time to publicly yearn for a small bag. This is where Thorstein Veblen saunters into the room. An American economist with the soul of a satirist, he wrote about conspicuous consumption, the way people deprive themselves of necessities in order to appear well dressed. Because dress isn't merely warmth, it's reputation. And Birkin isn't just conspicuous consumption, it's conspicuous consumption in its purest form. A Veblen good, the kind of object whose desirability rises with its price. It's not a bag to carry things in, it's a bag that carries you. It's not expensive because it's useful, it's expensive because it's expensive. The cost is the point, and the point is the cost. And everyone involved likes to pretend this is normal adult behaviour. Of course, someone will now say, yes, but clothes are also fun. Quite right. Clothes can be style, play, performance, pleasure. I occasionally enjoy wearing a suit. Not because I think it improves my soul, not because wool carries moral authority, but because a suit is a good costume. That's all. It edits you. You put it on and you become a version of yourself with sharper outlines and better PR. It says, this person is serious, this person has arrived, this person might plausibly say, let's take this offline without being arrested. When I wear one, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm putting on a costume. It might as well be a pantomime horse. Because frankly, all clothes are costumes, even normal clothes, especially normal clothes. The difference between a business suit and a pantomime horse is that one is socially approved and the other is honest about being theatre. Clothes are not just what we wear, they are what we perform. And nowhere is this clearer than among children. Children don't merely wear clothes, they weaponise them. Adults at least pretend their judgments are about standards, but children go straight for the throat. Wrong trainers, dead. Wrong jacket, socially crucified in the lunch break. Last year's thing, or the cheap version of this year's thing, and suddenly you're not a person so much as a cautionary tale. Because clothes are one of the first ways children learn about class. Not by reading Marx, obviously, but by spotting who belongs and who doesn't, who can afford the right badge, the right logo, the right cut, the right amount of studied indifference. It's cruel. It's performative. And it's also training. That's where you learn that clothes are evaluation devices, that fabric can get you sorted, priced, mocked or excluded. You begin quite early to iron yourself psychologically, to smooth out the bits that might get you laughed at, to dress for survival. One of the few genuinely enjoyable things about ageing is that you become invisible. Not in the tragic violin solo sense, in the literal sense. You move through public space and younger people simply don't register you. You become background furniture, the human equivalent of a bus stop. Bleak, yes, but useful. Because once you're broadly filed under old person or eccentric or someone's uncle who's gone a bit feral, you do gain a small freedom. You can wear what you like. Slippers, dressing gown, overcoat, 3 shirts, 2 jumpers, all worn at once like something rescued from a maritime disaster, and the world just nods and thinks, oh dear, crazy old person. You've drifted out of the competitive arena of appearance and into the human equivalent of a donkey sanctuary. But when you're younger, clothes are read like testimony. A scuffed shoe becomes a character flaw. A wrinkled shirt becomes a life failure. The wrong label and suddenly you're the wrong kind of person. Sloppy appearance becomes sloppy thinking. As if intelligence is stored in collars. As if competence lives in cuffs. As if moral fibre can be steamed. And this is why ironing feels personal when it goes wrong. Because it isn't really the shirt that's being worked on, it's you. The iron is not trying to make the shirt acceptable. The iron is trying to make me acceptable. The shirt waits there, limp, unbothered, innocent of all ambition. And somewhere in the background, society clears its throat and says, "Go on then, prove you can manage yourself. Prove you can present as tidy, competent, regardless of what your body is doing, regardless of what your life is doing, regardless of whether you've had sleep, money, help, or in my case, the deluxe package containing 2 functioning arms." It's a lot to ask of a piece of cotton. And frankly, if the world wants me crisp, it can come round and iron my bloody shirt.